So this is the setup for Iron Curtain, the standard combat series hypothetical scenarios for the Cold War. Actually this is the 1945 setup for the first two scenarios, which are basically the Western Allies will attack. The first one, the Western Allies will attack the Russians along the start line. Is the red line there that runs along where the ceasefire of after 45. So kind of an interesting start position, but as you can see, all the red and then the green and the blue and khaki for the Allies. So this is the same setup for both scenarios for 45, where the first one is the Western Allies will attack and try to take a few cities before 10 turns, and the next scenario is the Russian or Soviets will attack the Allies and try to take a few scenarios. And part of this game runs, well, this whole game with all its scenarios has two modes. They have a few turns that will blacked out. That's up there. That's kind of blurred. Is the tension track. So you have a couple turns to maneuver around before the shooting starts, and you get to do so many turns before things happen. The war breaks out. Basically, a tension track, and so that's kind of, it's two types of turn sequences in this game compared to the standard series rules. And the other interesting thing is that it runs scenarios of 62, 75, 83, 89. And the 62 and 75 are strictly Soviet invasions, whereas 83 and 89 you have Soviet or NATO offensives, and each, so you get a kind of duality on the setups. And the 45 doesn't have any chemical or nuclear weapons compared to the other scenarios, and that's about it for this. So we shall see. This is the 45 setup, but I don't know how the Western Allies, well, are going to actually win. I can see where the Soviets can really push hard with their units, but they're not as, they got a lot of units, but they're not as powerful. The infantry divisions are 2s, whereas the Allies are 4s, and their armor's up 8. And you can see there. So it's a little more powerful on the Western Allies, but they don't have as many units. So let's see how the Western Allies and then the Soviets, who wins in 45. So this is the start of the first scenario of the Soviet side, and a little bit of the Western Allies. After basically not even one full turn of the tension, whereas you move up units and roll on the tension track, and that went to level 5 pretty quick. But the Western Allies were able to move up some British to to the border. Soviets were able to move blocking forces here along the road. The areas marked with the little white crosses are the objectives for the Allies on this scenario. They need 6 city hexes, which Berlin's 4, to out of the 6 hexes out of the 11 to win. And we'll see if they can do it. And this is going to be the start of turn 1 of 10 for the war. So here's the front line after the first turn of the shooting war. And you can see everybody's moving up. A few units were kind of overrun and killed over here with the British and the Russians here. It's actually a counterattack killed an entire UK division, just like that one there, the 978. Then they're kind of exploiting out to probably hit here in the center to create a hole. I think the Western Allies are kind of like, well, take 4 hexes of Berlin is a good idea. And then you just need 2 more to take it. Prague looks pretty rough to take, but Vienna, if you can get through the terrain, Vienna's right there, looks pretty decent with all this forces. Basically trying to attrition out the Soviets over there, but with such a skeletal smaller force sitting here trying to push on Prague, the Soviets could totally shift down to protect Vienna if needed. But the weather kind of was bad on the first turn, so we didn't have to deal with that with the air forces. So this was strictly ground. So on to turn 2. So this is the beginning of turn 4 in Iron Curtain here. The first scenario. The Western Allies have pushed towards Vienna here. Killed a few units. It's the losses for the Soviets and losses for Western Allies. Western Allies have 2-stepper units. All the ones that they have killed are basically single step and a low power. The push to Prague is kind of just going to be there only if they lower the number of units there to protect other fronts. Pushing hard onto that there, which is Dresden. And we got Berlin here, which has been the most contentious here on both sides. A lot of the units lost by the Soviets have been units that were in the line by themselves, usually surrounded and taken out, either by overruns and surrounded, but they got reinforcements coming up here, and also all these will be coming in the next few turns. The Western Allies have none, so they got 7 turns to get this done. After 3 turns, the Soviet Air Force kind of took a beating on the turn. We'll see how much they survive here. But generally, strikes are basically a 5 or a 6 on depending on the train types for bombers to make any difference. And noted on the CRT here that no, if you roll snake eyes on any of them, the attacker is gonna lose 2 steps. The CRT is pretty potent here. And we'll see what turn 4. So this is the beginning of turn 5. Not much happened. A few units died on both sides. Pushing hard towards Berlin. Getting close to that victory point there. Russians push back here near from Czechoslovakia. But the Western Allies are pushing hard through to Vienna. The notice is I should be attacking a lot harder, and even on the odds chart here, basically, even at 1-to-1, if you roll anything above a 7, it's a defender hit, and retreats are 3 hexes, which is really good. Even on a 1-to-1 odd, that would really force units away, disrupt this line, so I guess make this even more bloody with 5 turns left. It's not much time to try to take 6 hexes, so this game's going to be, scenarios are pretty going to be bloody, fast, and quick. So, except the odds for the Cold War period is slightly, significantly different compared to the 1945 odds, which is kind of more strictly standard combat series. So this game has a different odds chart for the more modern scenarios. So on to turn 5, and we'll see how things go. So turn 5 was bloody. The Russians just like, alright, rolled well on 1-to-1s and killing steps, pushing back units all along here. Good die rolling. The only push back here kind of ripped a hole here, so since it's only one, no, there's 2 there. It's for Prague, I think. It might be a no-go for the Western Allies here, but Vienna is very threatened with all these units here. So there's a possibility, but I mean, we shall see with the further attacks. The Western Allies don't have any units, but the Soviets are pulling in units here, so probably saving Berlin, so things are not looking good. They can do it. They got 4 turns to go. The air was bad weather, so no issues there. On to turn. So this is the start of turn 8. I think I'll be calling this for the Western Allies because in basically 3 turns to get 6 hexes doesn't look like it's going to happen. Basically playing it a little suboptimal and doing a broad front attacks I don't think is good for the Western Allies. So I'll call this one scenario, but we'll see what I learned in this one we'll do for the Soviet side. See if they can do better than the Western Allies.